The last sound I heard in that house was the low hum of the dishwasher. Not her voice. Not a slammed door. Not even a goodbye. Just that mechanical whirring. Like even the machines were going through the motions better than we were. She was upstairs when I walked out. Probably still on that phone call. Probably still laughing at something he said. And me? I was gripping the steering wheel in the driveway, staring at the front door I'd installed with my own hands 5 summers ago. The one she said made the house feel safe. Ironic, huh? I didn't cry. Not then, anyway. It had all started 48 hours earlier with a stupid sock on the bathroom floor. I asked her, gently, if she could not leave her socks next to the sink, because I had stepped on them wet and nearly slipped. That's it. That's all I said. She looked at me with those empty eyes and replied, without missing a beat. Emery, I swear to God, if you died tomorrow, I wouldn't feel anything. No yelling. No rage. Just pure, clinical apathy. Like she was diagnosing a terminal illness in someone else's body. I stood there, towel around my waist, hair dripping. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. She just stepped past me, picked up the sock, and said, happy now. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling like it had answers. The fan made this faint clicking sound every rotation. I started counting them just to keep from screaming. By morning, she was humming in the kitchen like nothing happened, pouring coffee, scrolling her phone, wearing the robe I bought her on our anniversary. Her hair still wet from the shower I used to share with her. And I just stood there like a stranger. I didn't even pour my own coffee. I just watched her pour hers, take the first sip, then walk away like I wasn't even in the room. That's when it clicked. I didn't live there anymore, not really. So I waited. I waited until she went upstairs for her usual 11 a.m. meeting, which didn't sound like a meeting at all anymore. I'd been hearing things. Smirking voices. Giggling. Sometimes she'd come down flushed like she'd been sprinting, but we both knew she hadn't touched the Peloton in months. And I did nothing. I packed a single duffel bag. My laptop. My old boots. A few shirts. My meds. Nothing sentimental. No wedding photos. No stupid coffee mugs with our initials. I turned the dishwasher on because the sink was full and she always hated that. Some pathetic part of me still wanted her to come down and see an empty house with clean dishes. Before I left, I wrote one sentence on a post-it note and stuck it to the fridge. You win. That was it. I didn't even know what she'd won. Freedom, maybe. Space. The right to tell her friends I was unstable. A phase. A husband who never knew how to be a man. I drove. No GPS. No music. Just silence. My phone kept buzzing. Then it stopped. Then it buzzed again. I turned it off. And now here I am, in a place I won't name, sitting in a chair that's too low for this desk, staring out a motel window at a diner parking lot. She hasn't called. But someone else has. Someone I never expected. And what they told me made me realize. I was never supposed to hear what she said upstairs. But I did. And that's when everything changed. The motel had wallpaper that peeled at the corners and a heater that hissed like it was gasping for air. I didn't care. I sat on the edge of the bed, chewing the inside of my cheek until it bled. I kept replaying her voice in my head, not just what she said about me meaning nothing, but the way she said it. Not out of anger. Not even out of disappointment. It was like I was a man who delivered a package 10 years too late, and she simply had no use for me anymore. But that wasn't what kept me frozen. It was the voice I heard on the phone upstairs before I left. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. Honestly, I was just walking past the vent near the baseboard on my way to the garage. But the words drifted down like whispers from hell. A man's voice. Confident. Unbothered. He laughed and said something I'll never forget. Don't worry, Blythe. By the time he figures it out, you'll have everything in your name. I stopped cold. I remember my hand resting on the doorknob. I hadn't even turned it. I just stood there, with my heart hammering in my chest like it was trying to outrun my ribs. And then her voice followed, cool and amused. You think he'll check the accounts? He's never even looked at them in 10 years. He's too busy asking if I want pancakes or waffles. They both laughed. Like it was all a joke. Like I was the punchline. I didn't know what they meant at the time. I didn't want to know. All I could think was, get out. Just get out now before you fall apart in front of her. But now, in that cheap motel with the cigarette-burned blanket and a TV from 2003, I opened my laptop for the first time in days. I logged into the joint account we'd had since our honeymoon. Password still worked. Blue Cabin 07, a reference to the Airbnb in the Catskills where we first said, I love you. How poetic. The balance was just over $142.38. I refreshed the page 3 times. Same number. Gone. Nearly $58,000. Everything from our savings, retirement transfers, even the rainy day fund we set up after I got pneumonia. All of it wiped. I wasn't angry. I was numb. I stared at the screen for a long time, then clicked over to her Venmo history, something I hadn't done in years. And there it was. Multiple transfers to someone named Dev, some labeled as appliances, consulting, or simply Red Heart. The last one? $11,300, sent 4 days ago. Caption: for the move. What move? I opened our mortgage account. Paid off. Completely. I checked the deed history. Transferred. To her name. Sole owner. Signed and notarized 2 weeks ago. And the best part? It was all legal. She didn't even need my permission. My name was only listed as a co-borrower. I'd signed a document years ago, something she said was just a refinancing form. She brought it to me on the couch while I was sick and said, "Sign here, babe." I already filled most of it out. I signed it between coughs, too foggy to think twice. She was planning this. Not for days. Not weeks. Years. That's when the real grief hit, not just losing her, but realizing how stupid I'd been. How willingly I let myself become blind. I thought being a good husband meant trust, patience, understanding. But now I understood. To her, being a good husband meant being harmless. Predictable. Soft enough to manipulate, but stable enough to keep paying the bills. I didn't sleep that night. Around 4 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jordan, my old college roommate. We hadn't talked in months. It read, "Man, I think we need to talk. About Blythe. I waited too long to say anything. You deserve to know what I saw." I stared at the screen, rereading it until my eyes burned. I didn't reply. Not yet. But my fingers hovered over the keys. Because whatever he was about to tell me, deep down, I already knew it wasn't about money. It was going to be worse. Much worse. I didn't message Jordan back right away. Not because I didn't want to know. I did. I needed to. But part of me wanted to stay in that small, burning silence just a little longer. The space between ignorance and devastation. I got dressed and walked 3 blocks to a gas station just to clear my head. I bought a bottle of water, a bag of pretzels, and a scratch ticket I didn't even scratch. When I returned to the motel, I stared at the message again and finally replied. "What did you see?" The dots danced for a while, then stopped. Nothing. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Still nothing. Then the phone buzzed again, not a message, but a photo. At first, I didn't recognize it. A crowded lounge, dim lighting. Tables with glasses and wine bottles. A woman with her back turned, laughing. And then I saw her Blythe, smiling, draped across the lap of a man who wasn't me. His hand was around her waist, fingers resting comfortably like they belonged there. My stomach clenched. I knew what I was seeing, but denial is persistent. I texted, "When was this?" Jordan answered within seconds. 3 weeks ago. At the Ferris room. I was with my cousin. Didn't know she'd be there. Didn't know she was with him. The Ferris room. It was an upscale lounge 45 minutes from our town. I remembered she mentioned it before months ago when she said she had a client networking dinner. I had no reason to question it. Why would I? But now it was like every puzzle piece she'd ever thrown on the floor was flipping face up all at once. My next question came with shaking hands. "Did you talk to her?" His reply, "No. I didn't want to make a scene. But she saw me." She froze, then acted like nothing happened. That sentence, "she saw me, then acted like nothing happened," hit me harder than I expected. It meant this wasn't some drunken mistake or impulsive slip. This was normalized. Routine. Comfortable. I went back to the photo and zoomed in. Her eyes weren't distant. They were alive. Excited. More expressive than I'd seen them in months. She used to look at me like that. That night, I finally called Jordan. He answered on the second ring, sounding nervous. We talked for 2 hours. He told me he'd suspected something was off for a while. She blocked him on social media last year for no reason. Claimed it was too many political rants. But he wasn't political. He said he overheard her once at a holiday party whispering something to a man at the punch bowl. Nothing concrete. Just tone. He kept giving her the benefit of the doubt, like I did. He also told me something else. That the man in the photo? His name was Conrad Vale. Real estate broker. Divorced. Early 50s. Wealthy. Charismatic. Known for hosting luxury retreats for clients. Jordan had seen him around town with different women before. But according to his cousin, who used to work at Conrad's firm, Blythe wasn't just one of them. She was his assistant. Had been for over a year. She never told me that. She'd said she was working freelance consulting gigs. That was why her hours were irregular. That was why she'd stopped inviting me to her events. Because she had been working for him. For this. Suddenly, I remembered one night in December. A blizzard had knocked out the power. I'd made a fire in the living room, poured her favorite red wine, even lit candles. She came home late, hair snow damp, said she was too tired to sit by the fire. Went straight to bed. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. Maybe I was too needy. But now I knew she'd already replaced me. I was just an unwanted warmth she tolerated out of habit. I ended the call with Jordan by saying 3 words. Thank you. Finally. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, thinking not about revenge, not even about heartbreak, but about the scariest part of all. How much of my life had been a lie that I enthusiastically participated in. The next morning, I opened my laptop and searched how to prove infidelity when you're legally separated but not divorced. What I found wasn't comforting, but it gave me a direction. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't even going to warn her. I was just going to disappear from her world in a way that would make sure she'd never stop wondering where I went. And that was just the beginning. The strange thing about betrayal is that it doesn't break you all at once. It slices you in places you don't notice until you move a certain way and suddenly start bleeding. That morning, as the sun cut through the greasy motel blinds, I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel grief anymore. What I felt was stillness. Cold, absolute stillness. Like I'd crossed into a part of myself I'd never accessed before. The kind of place you only reach when your soul has been scraped down to the bone and you finally stop trying to scream. I opened my email. Not to message her. Not yet. I had a better idea. I logged into the cloud storage account I had forgotten even existed. It was a shared folder Blythe and I used years ago to store everything from wedding photos to scanned documents. Back when we used to dream together. I thought maybe she'd stopped using it. I was wrong. Very wrong. The folder had changed names. It was now labeled BG Clients Private. My stomach tightened. I clicked it open and what I saw next shifted the ground beneath me. There were dozens of documents. Contracts. Spreadsheets. But not just financials. There were personal logs. Notes she had written about people. Men. Clients. Almost like a journal mixed with a conquest list. My name didn't appear once. But his did. Conrad Vale. There were folders with initials. CV. SM. RT. Each one had pictures, PDFs, emails. But the one labeled CV had a scanned prenup form dated only a week ago. Then I found it, an itinerary. A printed flight confirmation. 2 tickets to Naples, Italy. First class. June 11th. Her name. His name. And the title on top, New Beginnings. That's when something in me hardened. I realized this wasn't just an affair. This was her life now. I was already a ghost. She just hadn't buried the body yet. She was going to leave me officially. Quietly. Legally. After she made sure everything I had was transferred or depleted. And she wasn't even going to have the decency to tell me to my face. That was her endgame. And if I let her, it would work. I stared at my reflection in the motel mirror for a long time. I looked like a man halfway between self-pity and something dangerously close to clarity. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to beg her to stay. I was done being the guy who waited in the shadows of his own marriage. But I wasn't going to explode either. No angry texts. No screaming matches. That's what she expected. And what she expected. I would not give. I took a day. Then another. I called in a favor from an old friend named Vic, an ex-paralegal who owed me for helping him through a nasty DUI situation years ago. Vic still had access to tools. Quiet ones. He helped me request a forensic audit of our shared financials, disguised as routine estate organization paperwork. He also pointed me to a firm in Albany that specialized in quiet asset recovery. No courtroom drama. Just results. He warned me it would cost a bit. I told him I only needed enough to cover the hit, not survive it. And then I sent a package. No return address. Inside was a single flash drive and a handwritten note that said, I backed up everything. You missed more than you thought. I dropped it in a mailbox 6 blocks from her job. That night, I checked my phone for the first time since I'd left. 47 missed calls. 19 voicemails. All from her. The latest one, recorded at 2:12 a.m., was just her breathing hard and whispering my name. Emery, please. I don't understand what's going on. Call me, please. I didn't listen to the rest. She was panicking. Good. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't. I booked a temporary P.O. box in a city she didn't know I had friends in. I updated all my passwords, froze my credit, closed out my old bank account, and opened a new one using a mailing service I paid cash for. I was becoming someone she couldn't find, even if she wanted to, which I knew she didn't. Not really. Not until things started slipping through her fingers. It was 2 days later when the second message came through. This time from a number I didn't recognize. It simply said, "You don't know me, but I know who she really is. I've been watching this for longer than you have. Please don't delete this. I need to tell you what I know, because you're not the only one she's done this to." I froze. Another victim? Another man? Or something even worse? I stared at the message, and for the first time since she looked me in the eye and said I meant nothing, I smiled. Because suddenly, I wasn't alone. I sat in the back of a closed-down diner off Route 94 with my phone screen burning in my hand. The message was still there. A stranger claiming to know my wife, ex-wife, better than I did. I wanted to ignore it, honestly. I was already buried in enough confusion and betrayal to last me a decade. But something about the tone, controlled, urgent, not begging, not ranting, felt disturbingly real. I replied with one word, talk. 15 minutes passed. Then another ping. Can you meet? I have proof. I'm not asking for anything. Just, you should know what she's capable of. That word, capable, made me feel nauseous. Not because I didn't believe it, but because it confirmed a quiet fear I hadn't said out loud yet, that what I'd discovered so far was only the surface. I texted back. Where? We met in a neutral space, coffee shop attached to a bookstore, in a part of town where no one knew my name. I wore a hoodie, baseball cap, glasses, like a man in hiding. Because I was. He walked in 5 minutes after I did. 40-something. Lean, sunken eyes, expensive but tired coat. He looked like someone who used to care about appearances but had stopped somewhere along the way. He sat down without greeting and slid a manila envelope across the table. Name's Kent, he said, not offering a hand. You were married to Blythe, right? I nodded. He didn't blink. So was I, 2011 to 2014. Her last name back then was Lawson. The floor dropped out from under me. He leaned forward and spoke quietly. She's done this 3 times that I know of. Builds a life. Gains control of finances. Then slowly erases you. Legally. Financially. Emotionally. She doesn't explode, she dissolves. By the time you notice, you're already dust. I wanted to argue. To say no. She wouldn't. Not like that. Not to me. But I knew that voice in my head was the same one that ignored the late nights, the extra phone, the vanishing funds. I opened the envelope. Inside were court records, tax forms, a restraining order she filed against him, then dropped. No charges. Just a way to block access to joint assets during the separation. She filed a claim that I threatened her, Kent said. I scanning mine. Said I had violent outbursts. I had one speeding ticket and a sarcastic mouth. That's it. But she had witnesses, people from her gym. Friends I never met. You know why? I shook my head. Because they didn't exist. I found out later they were paid. One of them was a barista she tipped $200 to write a fake testimony. I felt something in my ribs seize up. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I remembered that gym. She used to go there twice a week. She always came home sweaty, flushed, claiming she stayed after class to chat with a woman named Lauren. There was no Lauren. Kent continued. She uses men, but not the way you think. She doesn't just sleep with them. She learns them, studies them, finds their softest spots and builds her escape plan around it. She told me she couldn't have kids. I found out 6 months after our divorce that she'd terminated a pregnancy 2 weeks before she left. The air in the cafe felt suddenly heavy, like the walls were closing in around me. I asked the question that had been clawing at my throat. Why tell me all this now? He looked tired. Because you're the first one who didn't vanish. The others, one of them died. Suicide. The others in rehab. She keeps moving. New states. Slight name change. Always someone with assets. She looks for vulnerability masked as stability. And you, Emery, you look like someone who gave everything. He wasn't wrong. I asked if he knew about Conrad. He laughed under his breath. Of course. They've been linked for years. Sometimes he's her mentor. Sometimes he's the client. He's in on it. They're a team. Always have been. When she leaves him, it's never for good. It's a loop, a pattern. They use people, drain them, and rebuild somewhere else. The pieces were snapping into place faster than I could absorb them. I suddenly remembered a weird moment from years ago, Blythe crying over a photo of someone named Ellis. Said it was a brother she'd lost young. But the photo was grainy, looked old, like it had been printed from Google. I'd asked her once why she never mentioned Ellis again. She just said, "It's too painful." There was no Ellis. There never was. Everything was fabrication. A beautiful lie in a lavender robe who once told me I was the safest place she'd ever known. I left the cafe with the folder in my jacket and Kent's words still echoing in my ears. When I got back to the motel, I did the only thing I could think of. I emailed my boss, requested a 6-month leave of absence due to health complications, and deactivated all my personal social media accounts. Blythe wanted a clean exit, but I wasn't giving her that. If she wanted me gone, invisible, erased, I'd play along. But first, I'd leave her something she couldn't wash off. And I knew exactly where to start. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was spiraling. I was done spiraling. I was thinking. Quietly. Precisely. Like a man who had just been shown a blueprint for his own destruction and now held a lighter in one hand and the matches in the other. I didn't want to destroy her. Not exactly. That's what made this worse. I wanted her to remember me. I wanted her to know that the man she erased didn't just vanish. He waited, then moved. I started by reaching out to the only person who ever made her nervous, her half-sister, Nina. They hadn't spoken in years. I remember Blythe once telling me Nina was a gossip with no ambition. But when I messaged Nina on an old Facebook profile she hadn't used in a while, she replied within 10 minutes. Her first words were, "You're still with her? Jesus. I figured she buried you by now." That alone told me everything I needed. Nina lived 2 states away, ran a small Etsy shop, and had been disowned by their mother after accusing Blythe of stealing their grandmother's inheritance. No one believed her except now. I did. I told her everything. The money, the affair, the manila envelope from Kent. She didn't flinch. Didn't say "I told you so." She just asked, "How much proof do you want?" I gave her one answer, enough to make her look in every mirror twice before trusting her own reflection. Nina had screenshots, emails, even an old burner number Conrad once used that she'd traced back to a set of short-term rental contracts in both of their names. They moved around the country like they were flipping identities for sport. She even found a legal document where Blythe had signed off under a different last name entirely, Laura Vance. That was the version of her who married a man in Arizona and drained his accounts before disappearing. She wasn't just a cheater. She was a shapeshifter. I took everything Nina gave me and compiled it into a file. Then I sent it to a private investigator in Albany with a request, track all public assets tied to her name, maiden or otherwise. Anything held jointly with Conrad Vale. Property, vehicles, corporate affiliations, licensing history. I paid up front. He replied an hour later, "This is going to be interesting." I also made a decision I never thought I'd make. I called my mother. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since she made a passive remark at Thanksgiving that Blythe had cold eyes. I defended my wife, told my mom to drop it. Now, as soon as she heard my voice, she knew something was wrong. When I told her I'd left Blythe, she didn't say why. She just said, "It's about time." Then, softer, "You can stay here as long as you need." But I knew something wasn't right. I just didn't want to be the one to say it. The only time I got choked up was when she said, "You were fading, Em. You didn't laugh the same." I thought I was losing my son and didn't know how to get him back. That crushed me, because I hadn't noticed. I hadn't seen myself slipping beneath the surface. And now, all I could do was resurface piece by piece. The next step wasn't cinematic. It wasn't vengeance. It was a letter. I handwrote it, folded it twice, and sealed it in a plain white envelope. To Conrad Vale. From a man who doesn't belong in the background anymore. Inside was a simple message. "She's done it before. She'll do it again. You're not special. Just next." And a flash drive. The drive included 2 things, a PDF folder of Nina's files and a hidden audio recording from one of Blythe's phone calls I'd captured on an old smart speaker she'd forgotten was still active. The conversation was short, but damning. She laughed about how fast Conrad folds when you smile at him like he's the only man alive. I mailed it from a completely different city. Then I waited. But not long. 3 days later, my phone rang from a restricted number. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, I heard only one voice, Blythe. But not the Blythe I remembered. Her voice trembled. She was holding back something. Emery, she said, breath short. I don't know what you've done or how you know, but please don't ruin everything. You don't understand what this will cost. You don't understand him. There it was. Fear. Not for me. For him. The man she'd bet her future on. The man she tried to build her empire with. And in that moment, I knew I was finally visible again. Not to win her back, but to haunt her memory. There are moments in life when silence feels louder than a scream. That voicemail from Blythe, so stripped of arrogance, so full of something I couldn't quite name, echoed through my body like a siren in a deserted town. I'd spent weeks trying to get her to see me, remember me, realize that I wasn't just a man who folded laundry and paid bills. But now, hearing her ask me not to ruin things, not to upset him, that's when I realized I'd been playing the wrong game entirely. This wasn't about betrayal anymore. This was about something darker, something buried under layers of polished lies and clean exits. I replayed the message 5 times, dissecting every breath, every pause. The way she said, "You don't understand him," chilled me more than anything she'd ever said directly to me. Because for the first time, I heard something she never allowed herself to show before: fear. So I called Nina. She picked up instantly. What happened? She asked. I got a voicemail, I said. She sounded scared. Nina went quiet. Then she said, Conrad isn't just a scam artist. He's worse. There are rumors, unconfirmed stuff I couldn't prove. That's why I never sent anything to the police. He's been investigated, but nothing ever sticks. You try to touch him, and things go missing. Files. People. He's not someone you expose lightly. That hit me like a gut punch. I had sent him everything. His name, her betrayal, the evidence. I'd drawn a red circle around myself and stood in the center, arms wide, daring him to look. And he had. Because later that evening, I got another call. Unknown number. This time, I answered. It wasn't Blythe. It was him. Mr. Ashford, he said. Smooth, sharp voice. Almost surgical. I received your gift. Thoughtful. Reckless. And surprisingly thorough. I didn't speak. He continued, You seem like a man who doesn't understand how the world works. Which is unfortunate. Because people like you get eaten every day. My jaw clenched. Still, I said nothing. Then his tone shifted, slightly amused. But I'll tell you what. I respect the move. I really do. You surprised her. And me. That's rare. So here's my offer. Disappear. No more letters. No more packages. You get a clean break, and we all go our separate ways. But if you keep digging, if you make me look down, Emery, I won't like what I find. He ended the call without waiting for a reply. I stood in that motel room, phone to my ear, staring at the yellowed wallpaper, and for the first time since this entire thing started, I was afraid. Not because I was worried about myself, but because this was bigger than heartbreak, bigger than stolen money or affairs. This was organized, patterned, engineered, and I had just jammed a wrench into the middle of it. I called Vic, the ex-paralegal, and asked him one question. If someone wanted to disappear legally and permanently, how would they do it? He didn't even ask why. Just said, you'll need 3 things: a new ID, a legal reason to change residency, and someone to act as a bridge in case anything trails behind. I asked if he could help. He said, You've got 72 hours before someone notices how loud your quiets become. After that, you're either out of sight or under someone's heel. That was all I needed. I checked out of the motel the next morning, left behind a burned copy of the files and a short note. If anything happens to me, start with him. Then I took a bus to a city I'd only passed through once on a work trip. I rented a studio apartment under a temporary name, paid 3 months in cash, and set up a new bank account under a business umbrella Vic created for me, Ashford Consulting. It was paper-thin but legal enough. And then I waited. 2 days passed. No calls. No texts. Until one morning, I woke up to the sound of someone knocking on my door. Not pounding. Not threatening. Just knocking. I stood frozen. The peephole showed no one. I opened the door a crack, hard hammering. There was an envelope on the ground. Plain white. My name typed on the front. Inside, a single photograph. Blythe. Sitting alone on a bench. Her face swollen. A bruise under her eye. And under the photo, one line typed in red ink. You should have taken the deal. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just closed the door slowly and locked it. Because now I knew. This wasn't about marriage anymore. This was about survival. I didn't sleep that night. The photo of Blythe haunted me, but not because I still loved her. That was gone. It died somewhere between the empty joint account and Conrad's voice on the phone. What haunted me was something darker. The idea that I had let myself become a character in someone else's con, a background extra in a scheme I didn't write. And now they were telling me to stay quiet or disappear. But I had already disappeared once. It nearly killed me. I wasn't doing it again. The next morning, I didn't run. I walked 2 blocks to the UPS store and faxed a file to a law firm in Chicago that specialized in corporate fraud and legal coercion. I attached every bit of evidence: bank records, fake contracts, Nina's timeline, Kent's documentation, even the audio files. The firm offered whistleblower protection under state and federal channels. That was my backup plan, my insurance. Then I took the original envelope, the one with the photo, and handed it to a police officer standing outside a coffee shop. I told him, quietly, I think this might be connected to a long-standing financial exploitation ring. I want it logged. He asked if I wanted to make a formal statement. Not yet, I said, but soon. And then I did the last thing she ever expected. I came back to life. It started small. I reactivated my real email under a secure channel. Reached out to an old friend who worked in nonprofit tech infrastructure, someone I'd once helped fix a major platform bug at 2 a.m. He remembered. He offered me a consulting gig. Remote. Private. High pay. No spotlight. Next, I called my sister. We hadn't talked since before the collapse. She cried when she heard my voice. I thought you were gone, she whispered. I was, I said. But I'm trying to come back. Slowly. 3 months passed. I grew a beard. Changed my number. Filed to reopen a dormant LLC I'd started years ago and never used. Moved to a new town, quiet and wooded, where the locals don't ask questions unless you want them to. I started running again. Not because I was escaping anything, but because it felt good to breathe, to sweat on purpose, to feel like I was still in a body I recognized. One evening in early spring, I got a message from Nina. 3 words. It's over. He's gone. Attached was a screenshot of a news article. Real estate mogul under investigation for federal tax evasion and fraud. Conrad Vale. Mugshot. No smile. No arrogance. Just a man whose web finally snagged his own foot. I scrolled further. A statement from an anonymous whistleblower. Testimonies from 3 former associates. Someone had leaked internal documents, likely someone close to him. Or someone who used to be. Blythe's name didn't appear anywhere. But I wasn't surprised. She never left fingerprints. Only echoes. Still, the case cut off the oxygen to whatever game they had been playing. And that was enough. I never contacted her again. But I heard, through Nina, that she'd moved. Alone. No new man. No empire. Just a condo in a forgettable part of Arizona, under a new name no one was bothering to learn. And me? I'm still here. Living quietly. Working from my laptop, with coffee on the porch and silence that doesn't ache anymore. I'm not rebuilding the old life. I'm building a different one. Better. Honest. Simple. Sometimes people ask me if I regret walking away without a word. If I regret not giving her a dramatic confrontation. A scream. A fight. I tell them no. Because the most powerful thing I ever did was leave with nothing and rebuild everything on my terms. In full view. No shame. No noise. Just life. And this time, it's finally mine.